Imagine a world where a single man controls the flow of wealth, dictates the fate of industries, and influences the course of history, not by coincidence, but by design. That man was J.P. Morgan, and his legacy is far darker than the pristine image of a savior of the financial system that we've been led to believe. Today, we uncover the chilling truth behind how J.P. Morgan manipulated America's industries and history to fit his financial whims. Buckle up, because this is a conspiracy you won't soon forget. The story begins with America's lifeblood in the 19th century, railroads. These iron veins connected the nation, but they were also a chaotic mess of bankruptcies and cutthroat competition. To many, this was a disaster waiting to happen. To J.P. Morgan, it was opportunity. Morgan didn't just invest in railroads. He took over the entire industry. During the Panic of 1893, he stepped in, offering financial lifelines to struggling companies. But his help came at a cost. Morgan merged rival railroads under his control, creating monopolistic giants like the New York Central Railroad. Competitors were forced out, and Morgan installed his allies on their boards. By the early 1900s, he controlled over 60% of the nation's rail mileage. With every ticket sold and every ton of cargo shipped, Morgan's wealth grew exponentially. But who paid the price? Farmers, small businesses, and even the federal government, who were powerless against his grip on transportation. With this monopoly, Morgan didn't just control transportation, he controlled commerce. Farmers and businesses found themselves at his mercy, paying higher fees to move goods. Morgan profited from every ticket sold and every shipment sent. And as the railroads bowed to his will, the rest of America had no choice but to follow suit. But railroads were just the beginning. With that industry firmly in his grasp, Morgan turned his sights to the steel industry, the very foundation of America's Industrial Revolution. At the time, Andrew Carnegie's steel empire was untouchable, but Morgan saw another opportunity. In 1901, he persuaded Carnegie to sell his company for $480 million. To Carnegie, it was an early retirement. To Morgan, it was a chess move. He merged Carnegie's steel operations with smaller companies to form U.S. Steel, the first billion-dollar company in world history. This wasn't just business, it was domination. U.S. Steel produced 67% of the nation's steel, and Morgan's monopoly allowed him to set prices, control supply, and crush competition. While Morgan reaped profits, ordinary Americans faced higher prices, and workers toiled in horrific conditions. They saw none of this wealth. Instead, they endured low wages and grueling conditions, all while Morgan pocketed massive profits. From steel to railroads, Morgan's web of influence only grew, and yet his appetite for power was far from satisfied. And we can't talk about exploitation without mentioning the banking industry that Morgan was famous for. He was a master of manipulation, and when the financial crisis hit, most people were looking for a savior. In 1907, J.P. Morgan became that savior, or so the public believed. The Panic of 1907 sent the stock market into a free fall, and banks began collapsing. But Morgan's intervention wasn't charity, it was strategy. After calling a meeting of the nation's top bankers, locking the doors until they reached a solution, Morgan orchestrated a bailout to stabilize the system. But the conditions? Morgan funneled loans to his allies while forcing competitors to sell assets at bargain prices. He even arranged for his bank to absorb struggling ones, consolidating his power even further. This calculated maneuver solidified Morgan's reputation as the de facto central bank of America, paving the way for the creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913, a system Morgan helped design to favor the banking elite. But the creation of the Federal Reserve did not come without its challenges. Morgan had opposition coming from all sides. Some people even allege that this massive opposition may have led to the sinking of the Titanic. Some researchers suggest suggest, the sinking was far more than an unfortunate maritime disaster. It was a meticulously planned operation orchestrated by J.P. Morgan to eliminate opposition to the creation of the Federal Reserve. But could this really be true? Let's examine the evidence. In the early 1900s, the idea of a central banking system was highly controversial. J.P. Morgan, along with other powerful bankers, supported the creation of what would become the Federal Reserve. But standing in their way were three prominent and influential men: Benjamin Guggenheim, an industrial tycoon; Isidor Straus, co-owner of Macy's and a well-known philanthropist; and Jacob Astor IV, one of the wealthiest men in America and a vocal critic of centralized banking. These men were fierce opponents of the Federal Reserve, fearing it would grant too much power to a small group of elites. Ironically, men like Morgan. See, J.P. Morgan was heavily involved in the Titanic's parent company, the White Star Line, through his International Mercantile Marine Company. Morgan even had a luxurious suite reserved on the ship's maiden voyage. However, at the last minute, he mysteriously canceled his trip without telling anyone, citing health issues. Was this a coincidence or a calculated move to avoid the disaster he knew was coming? The theory goes that Morgan and his allies arranged for the Titanic to meet its tragic fate. By ensuring that Guggenheim, Strauss, and Astor were on board, Morgan could conveniently eliminate the most powerful opposition to the Federal Reserve. Critics point to the following coincidences: last-minute lifeboat reductions. The Titanic was short on lifeboats, a decision reportedly driven by cost-cutting measures. Was this an intentional design flaw? What about the ship's vulnerable course? Despite multiple iceberg warnings, the Titanic maintained its speed, an odd decision for such a prestigious voyage. Was this negligence or part of a larger plan? What about Morgan's last-minute cancellation? Why would the financier suddenly skip out on the ship that he'd so proudly endorsed and invited all his friends to? The Titanic sank on April 15th, 1912. Months later, the political landscape shifted dramatically. The three major opponents of the Federal Reserve were gone, and by 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was signed into law, solidifying Morgan's vision of a centralized banking system. While there's no direct evidence linking Morgan to the Titanic's doomed fate, the timing and circumstances raise uncomfortable questions. Could the most famous shipwreck have been a calculated move by J.P. Morgan to eliminate his enemies and pave the way for his financial agenda? While the evidence remains circumstantial, J.P. Morgan gained far too much power from this shipwreck for it to simply be a coincidence. With everything going his way, J.P. Morgan set his sights next on the electrical revolution. Electricity was the technology of the future, and J.P. Morgan was determined to control it. He initially backed Thomas Edison and his direct current system, but when Tesla's alternating current proved more efficient, Morgan had to find a way to take it down. In a ruthless move, he merged Edison Electric with rival Thomson Houston to form General Electric. Yes, the same General Electric you know today. Tesla, a visionary inventor, was sidelined and forced to sell his patents for a tiny fraction of their value. Morgan didn't just control the electricity market, he controlled the narrative, ensuring General Electric became synonymous with innovation and, more importantly, the dominant player in the electric industry, sacrificing Tesla's innovation for his own profits. And with these massive profits, Morgan found himself in the perfect position to manipulate a world war. By the time World War I erupted, J.P. Morgan's firm became the primary financier for the Allies. Through his control of U.S. banks, Morgan facilitated billions of dollars in loans and weapon purchases. Every bullet, every rifle, every artillery shell sent to Europe meant money in JP's pocket. Critics argued that Morgan prolonged the war for profit, as his firm earned commissions on every single transaction. While soldiers died on the battlefield, Morgan's wealth soared, cementing his role as the ultimate war profiteer. So you see, J.P. Morgan wasn't just a banker. He was a kingmaker, a puppeteer, and an architect of modern America, shaping its industries, policies, and its wars. But beneath the polished image lies a dark truth, that J.P. manipulated the system for his own financial gain, leaving a legacy of monopolies, inequality, and control that regular people still have to live with to this very day. Underneath his story of triumph and accomplishment is just a chilling reminder of the power one man can wield and the devastating consequences of unchecked greed. The question is, how much of our world today still operates in the shadow of the legacy that he left behind? Thank you so much for watching this episode of Far Out Forensics. Please support our mission to shine a light on the flip side of the human experience and history by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Until next time, I'm Faust Checho, reminding you to question the answers.